Lesson 1. Before we start talking about psychology as a science, before definitions, concepts, researchers' names, and the titles of theoretical approaches appear, we need to pause at a question more fundamental than any academic term. Why do we try to understand human behavior at all? Why do human beings, regardless of era, culture, or place in the world, observe other people so intensely, analyze their reactions, try to read their intentions, and very often struggle to understand themselves as well, their own decisions and their own emotions? This question is not born at a university. It does not originate in a laboratory or in a textbook. It emerges from everyday experience. It appears in human relationships, in conflicts, in disappointments, and in moments when other people's behavior, or our own, seems incomprehensible. Everyone knows situations in which someone reacts completely differently than we expected. Everyone knows moments in which they themselves make a decision that they later cannot explain calmly or logically. It is precisely in such moments that the need arises to understand behavior rather than to judge it quickly. In daily life, we function in a world that demands immediate responses. We do not have time for long analyses of every gesture, every word, and every decision. That is why we naturally rely on intuition. Intuition helps us predict other people's behavior, navigate social situations, and react quickly, often without full awareness of why we respond in a particular way. It is necessary for life. Without it, we would not be able to function normally. The problem begins, however, when we start treating intuition as a sufficient and final source of knowledge about human beings. Human behavior often seems obvious. We feel that we can see why someone did something, that motives are clear and causes easy to identify. Yet experience shows that this sense of obviousness can be an illusion. People regularly misjudge others. They attribute intentions that were not actually there. They reduce complex situations to a single personality trait. They assess behavior without considering context, history, or circumstances. Moreover, they often misjudge themselves just as strongly, their own motives and their own reactions. Psychology appears exactly at this point, where everyday explanations stop being enough, where we begin to see that intuitive understanding of human beings is fragile, prone to error, and strongly dependent on emotions, experience, and the observer's perspective. Psychology does not arise from a need to label people or from a desire to morally judge their behavior. It arises from a need to understand the mechanisms behind what people do, say, and experience. One of the key problems in understanding human behavior is that we mostly see the outcome, not the process. We see the reaction, but we do not see the entire path that led to it. We see the decision, but we do not see the tensions, thoughts, emotions, and earlier experiences that influenced it. Psychology focuses precisely on this invisible layer of human functioning. It tries to answer the question of what happens between a situation and a behavior, between a stimulus and a response, between what is external and what is internal. Understanding human behavior is also difficult because behavior is multidimensional. The same behavior can result from very different causes. Two people can behave in the same way while being driven by completely different motives. And conversely, the same cause can lead to very different reactions in different individuals. Psychology teaches that there is no single, simple explanation of human actions that can be applied to every case and every person. In everyday thinking, we often look for one cause, one reason, one explanation. Psychology shows that this approach is insufficient. Human behavior results from the interaction of many factors: individual characteristics, prior experiences, current emotional state, the situation a person is in, and the social context. Omitting any of these elements leads to oversimplifications and often to serious mistakes in understanding. Why does all of this matter? Because the way we understand human behavior directly affects the way we treat other people. If we believe that behavior is solely the result of character traits, it becomes easy to make hasty judgments and label others. If, on the other hand, we allow for the possibility that behavior is the outcome of complex processes, space emerges for reflection, caution, and responsibility. Psychology does not excuse everything, but it helps us understand better before we judge. Psychology is not only about other people. It concerns us to the same extent. Every person experiences moments when they do not understand their own reactions, when they act impulsively against earlier plans or convictions, when emotions take over rational reflection. Psychology also developed to help us understand these internal contradictions that are inseparable from human experience. At this point, it must be said clearly what psychology is not, at least not yet. It is not therapy, it is not a guidebook or a set of self-help techniques. It is not an instruction manual for human beings or a tool for manipulating others. It is a way of thinking about the person that assumes behavior has causes, but that these causes are not always obvious or easy to grasp. This approach requires patience, attentiveness, and a willingness to accept uncertainty. Psychology developed as a science precisely because everyday explanations proved insufficient. People needed a way to study behavior systematically instead of relying exclusively on personal beliefs and individual experience. This process was long and uneven. It led to the emergence of a field that constantly changes, revises its assumptions, and subjects its conclusions to critical reflection. This is not its weakness, it is its foundation. Psychology does not promise simple answers or quick solutions. It offers something else, a way of looking at human beings that takes the complexity of human experience seriously. It teaches that behavior is rarely the result of a single factor. It teaches that our intuitions can be misleading and that first impressions do not always reflect reality. It also teaches that understanding requires time, patience, and a willingness to revise one's own beliefs. If we accept that human behavior is complex and multi-causal, a natural question arises about the consequences of misunderstanding that complexity. What happens when we oversimplify other people's behavior? What happens when we attribute intentions, character traits, or blame too quickly without trying to understand the broader context? These questions are not abstract or purely theoretical. They have very real effects in personal relationships, in education, at work, in institutions, and in the way we organize social life. One of the most common consequences of simplified thinking about behavior is excessive cognitive certainty. When we believe that we know why someone acted the way they did, we stop asking questions. We stop being curious. We begin to close situations within ready-made interpretive schemes. Such certainty can be tempting because it provides a sense of control and order. At the same time, it blocks the path to genuine understanding. Psychology shows that the faster we reach conclusions, the greater the risk of error. Simplified interpretations of behavior also often lead to labeling. When someone behaves in a difficult or incomprehensible way, it is easy to assign them a stable trait: lazy, aggressive, irresponsible, disengaged. Such labels make the world simple, but they also distort reality. Behavior becomes detached from the situation in which it appeared and starts to be treated as an unchanging property of the person. Psychology teaches that this way of thinking is not only simplistic, but often harmful. Another important issue is that misunderstanding behavior influences our decisions about other people. In education, it can lead to unfair judgments of students. In the workplace, to hasty staffing decisions. In personal relationships, to escalating conflicts and lasting misunderstandings. When we interpret behavior solely through the lens of our own expectations and beliefs, we lose the ability to consider the other person's perspective. Psychology raises a question here about cognitive responsibility, about the extent to which we are willing to take responsibility for how we understand others. Cognitive responsibility means being aware that our interpretations are not neutral. Every explanation of behavior carries consequences. When we attribute bad intentions to someone, we change how we treat them. When we assume that someone's behavior results from a lack of character, we stop looking for systemic or situational solutions. Psychology does not remove responsibility for actions, but it reminds us that the way we understand those actions has a real impact on what we do as individuals and as a society. In this context, another question appears. Why did psychology have to become a science? If people have always tried to understand one another, why was everyday knowledge not enough? The answer lies in the limitations of human perception and memory. We are vulnerable to cognitive biases, selective memory, and the tendency to confirm our existing beliefs. Psychology as a science emerged to create tools that allow us to move beyond these limitations, at least partly. Scientific psychology does not promise complete objectivity. What it offers are procedures that make it possible to systematically test hypotheses about behavior. Instead of relying exclusively on individual experience, it tries to study patterns, relationships, and mechanisms in an organized way. This is what distinguishes it from everyday explanations. The point is not to replace common sense, but to supplement it and correct it where it proves insufficient. An important part of this approach is accepting uncertainty. Psychology teaches that many questions about human behavior do not have unambiguous answers. Research findings can be contradictory, and interpretations depend on context and on the assumptions that are adopted. Human beings are too complex to be described by simple laws. Psychology develops precisely because it can question its own conclusions and update them. Understanding human behavior also requires a shift in perspective, from judging to analyzing. Judging is fast and emotional. Analysis is slower and more demanding. It requires stopping, suspending first impressions, and allowing for the possibility that our initial interpretations may be wrong. Psychology does not eliminate moral judgment, but it separates it from the process of understanding. It first tries to answer how and why, and only then what to do about it. This way of thinking is especially important with regard to our own behavior. People are often harsh judges of themselves. They attribute their actions to a lack of willpower, weakness of character, or incompetence without analyzing the conditions under which they made decisions. Psychology offers tools for a more realistic view of oneself, not to excuse everything, but to better understand the mechanisms that guide us. In this sense, psychology is neither a collection of simple recipes nor an instruction for correct living. It is an invitation to look at the human being more carefully, to accept that behavior results from a dynamic interaction of many factors that change over time, to recognize that other people, and we ourselves, are more complicated than we would like to believe. If anything is meant to remain after this lesson beyond a single piece of information, let it be an attitude, cognitive caution, a readiness to ask questions instead of issuing quick verdicts, an awareness that understanding human behavior is a process. Psychology begins exactly where the illusion of simple answers ends. In the next lesson, we will take a closer look at the difference between everyday and scientific understanding of behavior. We will see why intuition can be unreliable and how psychology tries to supplement it, and sometimes correct it. For now, one thing is enough. The attempt to understand a human being is both an intellectual and an ethical effort. And that is precisely why psychology holds such an important place in reflection on human experience.